if you've been living in Mexico for more than a year and a half and you still don't speak fluent Spanish, you need to do better. Honestly, the biggest problem is probably that you're a very boring person and don't have enough hobbies, and that you need to quit being so boring and go out and get a hobby. So when you're first starting out in Spanish, right, it's good enough to just take advantage of the practice opportunities you have every day around you, right? Maybe that is saying hello to your neighbor, talking about the weather, whether that is interacting and asking some simple questions to the waiter, or to the person you just met at the bar, or to the person staying in your hotel, right? Just getting those basic questions in, interacting with the shopkeeper, with the people at the restaurants, interacting with the person who is repairing the wheel in your car, and just trying to get a little bit of conversation out of that person, right? Get a little bit of conversation out of that person, right? Above and beyond just the, hi, how are you, where are you from, right? Start to be able to ask them a few questions, right? This shouldn't take you more than 6 to 9 months-ish, right? And you should be at this point where you can go up to I was just thinking about yesterday, the amount of chances I had to practice Spanish was incredible. I could have spoken to the half a dozen people I walked past on the way down to the beach. I could have read a book, which I did read a book in Spanish, right? As I was sitting on the beach in the morning. I could have listened to a podcast in Spanish as I walked around. I could have listened to music in Spanish as I walked around. I said hello to my neighbor. I could have had a deeper conversation with him. How are you? Ask him about his life, or like how many kids does he have? What's he doing? What's his name? I could have gone into more depth with that. Same with the coffee shop person. I could have really engaged him in conversation. And it's going to require a little bit of, if you're going to get good at Spanish, it's going to require a little bit of a mentality shift. Because even though it might feel weird for us, if we were in the US, I'm not going to go around to every waiter I see and be like, where are you from? What do you do? How long do you work here? But when you want to get good at a language, you got to get over that social programming in order to get good at a language. Because if you're just going through and having the same conversation over and over and over again, that's all you're going to get good at. And when we're in a language we know, English, or in the US, I'm probably not going to go out of my way above and beyond to engage people in conversation because I don't need to practice the language, right? But when I need to practice the language, I need to shift that mentality a little bit and realize every opportunity I have, I can extend that in some way, right? So when you're ordering your food, not just ordering the food, but then being like, how long have you worked here? What is your favorite thing on the menu, right? Asking questions that are different than just giving your answer to the basics in order to practice. And that's the mentality shift I'm talking about. You want to come at it as, I'm trying to speak as much Spanish as possible, not to be annoying or not to be weird, but because I want to practice the language. And you achieve that practice in everyday situations by expanding, asking more questions. Maybe starting off with something as simple as, what's your favorite thing on the menu? And then going into, how long have you worked here? Where are you from? Maybe you ask about, do you have brothers and sisters? What's your favorite thing about living in this place you're at? In Puerto Escondido for me. What do you do when you're not working, right? Those like basic questions go a long way. It's a lot of really good practice. And the best way you can do this is to actually practice it at home and script it out, right? So you can go and sit there with ChatGPT, maybe, or just a pen and a piece of paper, and write down like, okay, right? Situation, I am at the store, right? Let's deal with that survival aspect first. What am I going to hear them say, right? What are they going to ask me? Cool. Now, what are 5 questions that I could ask this person above and beyond, do you have this, or where is this at, right? If you want to ask them how long they've worked there. If you want to ask, where are they from? Where do they live? How long have they worked there, right? Maybe you want to ask, what do they do when they're not working there, right? What's their favorite part about living in Puerto or whatever town you happen to be in, right? And then the next time you're at the grocery store or the next time you're at the little store, right? You go out of your way to be weird and ask the questions. You can't get good, really, really good at learning a language and speaking a language without being a little weird, right? Because you have to be weird. You're gonna have to be weird when it comes to asking people questions, right? People are gonna think you're weird when it comes to your listening abilities because there's going to be inevitably a delay between them saying things and your brain processing them, right? And so I think you're a little weird for that, right? You have to be weird in trying to write all the time and just getting used to writing the same thing over and over again, right? The metaphor I give it is like it's a river, right? It's the reason I ask students the same questions. What are you going to do this weekend? What did you do last weekend, right? Because each time you get the chance to explore the river again and again and again, and you can make more discoveries, right? So like maybe the first time we just list out the things. I woke up, I went to work, I went to the gym, I went to sleep. Great. Well, maybe the next time I woke up and I made breakfast. I went to work in my car. I worked for 7 hours. I returned home and went to bed, right? And just adding on more and more each time, right? So like maybe the next time it's I woke up and made breakfast. For breakfast I made eggs and bacon, right? I drove to work in my car. While I was driving, I was listening to music, right? Even though you're exploring this same stretch of the river, there's constantly new things, there's constant new little tributaries you can go down, right? And then once you're beyond the basic level in the language, right? When you already have the basics down, when you can comfortably tell likes and dislikes, give a quick little story in the past, right? When you're at that level, which is about 2 months, 2.5, 3 months in my class, once you're at that level, well now, we can only do so much practice with those basics, right? You need to find a way to get more in depth, right? And force yourself to practice, right? And so one of the best things you can do is quit being so goddamn boring and go and get a hobby, right? And what do I mean by this? Well, a hobby is great, specifically if it's a group class aspect of some sort, right? This could be dozens of different things, right? The only requirements are that it needs to be a group class and it needs to have some kind of physical movement to it, right? This could be anything from a CrossFit or yoga class, this could be Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai, this could be even something like an art class, a dance class, right? A meditation course, right? It doesn't really matter, right? But the idea is you want a group class that repeats frequently where you're going to see the same people over and over and over and over again, right? And the reason why I think group class is the best, right, is for 2 reasons. Is because you're going to get 2 types of people that you're going to run into, right? So you're going to run into the people who go there all the time, and you see them all the time, right? And you're going to run into people who pop in and out. Maybe they come twice a week, right? You see them once every other week, right? And so with those people, and then inevitably there's going to be new people who sign up all the time as well, right? So with the new people, we get a chance to practice the basic questions. What's your name? Where are you from? What are you doing here? What do you like about it? How long have you been doing CrossFit? Whatever. With those people we see every now and again, right? Well, we don't have to worry about so much the basics of the name, where you're from, because you should know that, right? But you could ask a little bit more in-depth questions, right? What do you like about this place? Why did you start CrossFit, right? What do your family do? What do you do, right? Do you have kids? Do you have a brother? Do you have a sister, right? You can get a little bit more in-depth on their background, right? And then the third type of person is the person that you're going to see all the goddamn time, right? The person who's at that yoga class every single day, right? Who's at jiu-jitsu class every single day, who goes to dance class every single day, right? And that person you're going to get to interact with on a deeper level and ask them things, maybe more specific questions about whatever hobby you're looking at, right? Maybe deeper questions about the town or the people or the lifestyle where you live, right? The group aspect is perfect for that reason because you get 3 different types of people. The people who just show up, the people you see every now and again, and the people you see all the time. And each of those requires you, it gives you the chance to practice 3 different levels of Spanish, right? The very, very basics, get to know you type of information. Going into a little bit more depth about likes, dislikes, family, asking about jobs, right? What they did last weekend, right? Because you've seen them before. And then you have the people you see all the time, where you can start to get into more in-depth conversations. You can start to focus more specifically on whatever you're practicing, right? The other reason I like group classes is because group classes give you something in common with that person, right? At the very least, that you guys both like to dance, you guys both like to box, you both like to do yoga, whatever it may be, right? You have something in common, and so you have a topic you can all fall back on. Especially once you are dealing with those people who are the ones you see all the time, right? When it's the people you just met or the people you see every now and again, right? this isn't as important. But when you're with the people who you see all the time, it's really nice to have something in common with them so that you can fall back to talking about it, right? When you run out of things to ask them, or questions to ask, or words to say, you can always ask, how was your workout yesterday? What are you doing in your training routine, right? You could ask, like, what's your favorite exercises, right? Why did you decide to start CrossFit? Why do you like training at this gym, right? There's so many things you can ask, and you have this common theme of yoga or dance or volleyball. It doesn't matter, right? Volleyball is also a great one, right? If you can find some kind of sport, even if it's not a group class, like volleyball or rock climbing or maybe skating even, right? Just some kind of physical thing. A group class is better just because you have that repetition, you have that bringing together of people, right? You have not the bringing together, you have repetition and also the routine of them wanting to come to the group class because it's part of their routine, right? Versus volleyball, since it's not a class, right? You get a chance to talk and interact with people, but not as much, I think. Maybe I'm wrong there. And the other thing I think that is important for this, for you to quit being so goddamn boring and get a hobby, is that there needs to be some kind of physical motion element to it, right? Especially when it's a group class, right? If it's not a class, right, it still is very useful in the fact that it's some kind of physical movement, because you can always just play the game and stop talking when you run out of words, right? For me, when I was studying Spanish and when I lived in Spain, actually even before that, when I was in the Dominican Republic, the big thing that allowed me to interact and engage with other people was playing baseball. I remember going and traipsing through some town in, I don't even remember where, in Dominican Republic, with a group of kids, and we would play baseball for 2 hours, right? I run through all my questions of like, where you from, what's your name, what are you guys doing, how do you like this place, what's your favorite thing about here, right? And so we went and played baseball, right? When I was in Spain, it was fantastic. I went and like started slacklining and rock climbing with a bunch of Spanish people, right? And this was really nice because it gave us like a pretty low pressure conversation environment as we're sitting around at the park. You know, it allowed me to get the practice of listening to them and like listening to the full-on conversation between all of them. It allowed me to get practice of like, okay, asking questions, and like there's times where in a group you're like not able to think quick enough to get the question out, right? But you still get that practice of coming up with the question, and the practice ends up with you being faster and faster and faster at it, so you can actually start to participate in the conversation, right? And then, inevitably, when I was like overwhelmed, or like my brain's like, oh my god, my head hurts, right? I just got up and went slackline, or like climbed a rock route, and nobody talked to me, and I was able to decompress and then come back and do it again, right? And this applies to volleyball or rock climbing, things like that, where like you can play, right? You go play when your brain starts to hurt, and then you go sit around and you talk and you have a conversation in Spanish, right? Until your brain hurts, until you feel like, okay, I'm seriously lost in the conversation, then you get up and go play, right? You get up and go get a drink, you get up and go do whatever, right? The other reason specifically for group classes, I think that like the active element, even if it's something like painting, right? Because the words get to get lined up with some kind of action. There's some kind of physical movement to it. It's a lot more easy to, if you don't know the word or you don't understand just intrinsically what it means, they have some kind of motion that they can give you, right? Like if you're at the gym and they say jalar and they start pulling towards them, or empujar and they start pushing, right? Or if you're in a painting class and they say pintar or dibujar, right? You have some kind of like motion to line up with the action. And in fact, if you're having trouble remembering some of the words, see if you can't add a physical action to it. For example, I find that I speak a lot more in Spanish with my hands than I do in English. Even though if you're sitting here watching, as I'm watching myself on this video right now, I'm speaking a lot with my hands, right? But in Spanish is way worse, right? And the reason that is because as I was learning Spanish, I started to line up the different verbs and different actions with the hand motions, right? So like, or stop, right? Begin, end, right? I would have like motions and I would start to talk with my hands because of a trigger to help remember what the word was. The group class, if it's physical activity, you get the benefit of visual and auditory cues because they're gonna say pintar and you see them painting something. They're gonna say jalar and you see them pulling something. They're gonna say the word estirar and you're gonna see them stretch in the yoga class. And so when you're just starting out, Like, you need to take advantage of every single opportunity. Flip the switch, be a little weird, right? Get used to just asking question after question after question after question, right? Like, you should have just a dozen questions that you can fire off, and even if you don't understand what he says back, you can go on to the next question, right? If you understand what he says and can ask a follow-up question on that answer, fantastic, do so. But if not, you also have another question that you can ask, right? Because the key when you're a beginner in a language is that you want to lead the conversation, right? And this can be kind of difficult because you don't have that much vocab, you don't have that many things you can say. But if you lead the questions, right? You lead your partner and you are the one asking the question, you're taking control, right? So you're keeping it in an area that you feel comfortable with, right? Because if I'm just like back questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? What are you doing here? Right? I'm really only giving him 1 or 2 or 3 options of what he can respond to me, right? Yes, no, I'm from here, right? And there's a little bit of variety, but for the most part, I can limit down what he's going to say and what I should be expecting him to say, and making it easier on me to kind of understand what he's saying. Versus if I just ask like a question of, what's your favorite vacation spot? Well, that's probably going to be easier. Or favorite food, I've narrowed it down to food, or favorite color, right? But if I ask why is going to lead into a more open-ended answer, right? And that's going to be a little bit harder for me to predict and take a guess and be like, I think he's probably going to go down this route. Versus if you're like about things like, what did you do last weekend, right? Well, you can kind of guess that most people are pretty boring, so there was probably some combination of sleeping, family maybe, hanging out with friends, right? Maybe they go out, right? Maybe they slept in, went to the gym, then went for a run, right? You can kind of have a more narrow aspect, right? And then ask people questions, right? Everybody you interact with, your goal should be to ask at least 3 questions to that person, right? So the waiter walks up, hola, buenos dias, right? And then they ask, you want to eat? Maybe you ask their name first off. ¿Cómo te llamas? That's the first question you ask. Great. They give you your name. Cool. Okay. And then you order your food. And then like next time they come back, ¿de dónde eres? Where are you from? Cool. That's question 2. Then maybe the next time they come back, what do you like about Puerto? Sobre vivir en Puerto, about living in Puerto, right? And you ask your 3rd question. Great. That should be your goal as a beginner learner. Every interaction you have, you should ask at a minimum 3 questions to that person, right? And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, it doesn't have to be anything terribly weird, like your favorite sci-fi movie, right? It can be just simple questions, right? And even if you ask that same question to every single person, you're still getting practice speaking, you're getting practice listening. And if you're smart, it's not going to end up being the same question, because you're going to ask follow-up questions, or you're going to come prepared each day or each time with different questions. So maybe the first time it's name, where you're from, what do you like about here? Maybe the next time it's name, where you're from, what do you do when you're not here? Maybe it's next time it's name, do you surf? Where's your favorite spot? Name, do you do yoga? What's your favorite title, right? There's so many options of things that you can go down, right? And that applies as well once you start getting into group class and you stop being so damn boring, you go get a hobby, right? And you join these group classes, you can apply that same logic to the people who are just showing up, right? What's your name? Where are you from? How long have you trained? What's your name? Where are you from? How long have you surfed? Right? What's your name? How long have you done yoga? What's your favorite type? What's your name? How long have you done yoga? Where's your favorite place you've done yoga? And then, on top of that, outside of that, you're also going to get the chance to apply the same logic of having some questions. Those people who you already know, right? People you already hang out with, right? And you know a little bit about them. You're never going to have 1 or 2 people you're close with in the class, right? You're going to ask them things above and beyond, what are you going to do tomorrow, and what did you do last weekend, right? Although that's a great way to start it out. What did you do last weekend, right? What did you do since the last time I saw you? Cool. It's Friday. Okay, what are your plans for this weekend? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do tonight? You're going to go to the bar, right? You can ask questions, right? And the goal should be just that. Try and find out ways, the step above, with your buddies in these group classes, is to hang out with your buddies outside of the group class, right? So maybe one of your questions one time is, let's go get a drink. You want to go get a drink? You want to go get spot coats? You want to go get food? You want to go down to the park? Whatever it may be. Let's go to the beach, right? Go hang out with them and have conversations, because that's a step beyond, right? Because when you don't have something in common to talk about, You're just like, now you're good friends, your CrossFit buddies or yoga buddies or whatever, right? So you have pretty good conversations with them. You kind of know a little bit more about each other. Well, good, because you're gonna feel comfortable with each other is the key. And then beyond that, like you take it outside of the CrossFit gym or the yoga studio, well now you're taking away the crutch, right? Because before, you could always fall back to asking about CrossFit or asking about yoga or asking about volleyball or whatever, right? But when you take it away, well now, I can't just always go back to that, right? I definitely could, right? If I'm just sitting there quiet for 10 minutes and I'm like, well, damn it, I want to ask a question, right? I can always go back and ask like a CrossFit related question that I haven't seen, right? But think of it like, midpoint, it's kind of like dating, right? Of like, you're taking it out of the safe zone, let's call it, right? It's kind of where you're like, trying to get to know another person, right? And so like, you're going to ask like a dumb question. What are you reading? What are you reading now? What's your favorite TV series? What's the last thing you watched on Netflix? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite animal? What's your favorite place you ever visited? Right? Favorites, when you run out of things, you can always run back to asking a question about your favorite. Right? What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? What's your favorite the other? Right? And that is how you go from being just acquaintances at the very beginning of just asking different questions to the different people you interact with on a daily basis, to making some friends and getting a hobby and quitting being so boring, right? And now you're having a little bit deeper conversations, right? And then you take it outside of that safe zone and you take it to a neutral area like the beach, like a restaurant, taco stand, whatever. And you start having other conversations, right? Maybe you're talking about the things around you. Maybe you're talking about their favorite things. Maybe they talk about things they've just recently read or seen or watched, right? It's kind of dating in that aspect of like, you find out a little bit more and more and more and more about this person, right? Let's not even get started on dating in another language. Thank you guys so much for watching, guys.